Welcome to the final video of the three-part series on the Hebrew alphabet. In the first one we covered the consonants, and the second we covered the vowels, and in this last one we will talk about the Begat Kefat letters, the three rules of Gutturals, and I will also show you some letters that either look or sound similar or the same and teach you how to know the difference between them. Let's first start with a review of all you need to know about the alphabet. First, you have to be able to recognize and pronounce each of the consonants and vowels. Also helpful, but not required, are the grammatical names or grammatical terminology for all the vowels and all the consonants. What is required is the length and group of each vowel. Remember that we have three vowel groups. We have the A sound group, we have the E sound group, and finally we have the O sound. The E and O have a variance. The E has a variant of an E, and then O has a variant of an U sound. They are interchangeable. They can lengthen between each other, etc. What you also have to know is the length of each. Remember that we have some that are extra long. They're only in the E and the OU groups. Then we have the long ones, and each sound has a long sound. Then we have a short, and only the primary vowels have a short sound. So we have the the long are only primary, and the short are all of them. And finally, then we have the short and the extra short, the Sheva group. Now we are going to look at the Begat Kefat and start there. So what are the Begat Kefat letters and what is special about them? The main thing about Begat Kefat letters is that they can take Dagesh Lene. Now what is Dagesh Lene and what is Dagesh in general? You already know the Dagesh because this is this little dot that is found in some of the letters of the alphabet, and with some it changes their pronunciation. So for example, the B becomes V if it has or has not the Dagesh. You've seen also the K and Ch, right? And then P and F, etc. So some letters can change their sound. However, that's not the only and not the primary reason for the Dagesh. So the first thing we need to recognize about the Dagesh, we have two types of these Dagesh or Dageshes, I guess. The first one is called Dagesh Forte or the strong Dagesh, and the second one is called Dagesh Lene or the soft Dagesh. What Dagesh Forte is, it is a Dagesh that indicates that there are two of the same letters. In other words, in the example that I have here, if we have two mems next to each other, they will join together and you will see it as a mem with a dot inside. The dot is called a Dagesh, and there is no change of pronunciation. You just have to recognize that there are two mems. And this can happen with almost any letter. The only exception to that are the Gutturals. We'll talk about them in a minute. So if you have a letter and it doubles next to each other, it'll combine into a single letter with the dot inside. It's called a Dagesh Forte, okay? It indicates that there are two of the same letters next to each other. For some letters within this group, if they receive this Dagesh Forte, it also indicates the change of pronunciation. So the difference between B and V, K and Ch, P and F, etc. Right? So if you have these letters that change the sound and they have the Dagesh Forte in them, they will still change the sound. If you see it in any other letter, the sound is the same. You just need to understand that there is a doubling. Now there is such a thing as Dagesh Lene. And Dagesh Lene, the only purpose of it is to change the sound. So this is going to be found only in those letters that do change these sounds. And they are called Begat Kefat for a very simple reason, because if you put them next to each other, the sound they make is Begat Kefat. So Begat Kefat. Okay? Begat Kefat. Now all of these letters, theoretically speaking, change the sound from hard to soft. But only in really three of them we actually hear it. So from B to V, from K to Ch, and from P to F. Those are very clear. Now with the G, we have G and G, we have D and the. So you can kind of sort of hear it with the Dalet, with the D and the, it's a little bit softer, and also with T and Th. So with the Dalet and Tav, it's almost like a TH. So with Dalet with TH, Th is the softer and Th is the softer T. Okay, but the only ones that I require you to really clearly pronounce it the same is with bet, bv, with kaf, kh, and with pe, p, f. If you pronounce g, d, t the same, there is no problem. So again, with the g, d, t, it's more theoretical. With the b, h, and p, it's very clear still today. Now, back in the day and also in certain areas, they still try to preserve all the changes in all of these Begat Kefat letters. So that's all you need to know about Begat Kefat letters, that they can change, they can take Dagesh Lene, the soft Dagesh, which it really only changes their sound. It has nothing to do with doubling. If you see the Dagesh in any other letter outside of Begat Kefat, it is always indicating doubling of that letter. Let's move on to gutturals. What you need to know about gutturals, first of all, you need to know what they are and what are the three rules. In Hebrew, these are the gutturals: Aleph, Ain, the two silent letters, and then Het, Chet, H, Ch, and finally also Resh, R. The unique thing about gutturals is that their sound is very soft or close to non-existent, close to silent, like with Ain and Aleph. With he, it's just a breath, right? So there is some kind of a sound, but it's very, very soft. With het, it's just like a he, it's just a little harder of a sound than he. So instead of a h, it's h, right? So still just a breath out, except your throat is closed. Now resh is very similarly pronounced to a het. If you pronounce resh as in Spanish with the tongue, r, that is not a guttural. The reason why resh is a guttural in Hebrew is because they do not pronounce it with their tongue as r, but they pronounce it with their throat as ch. So basically, all the gutturals are pronounced in the throat, and they are all very soft sounds, and they are all kind of just a breath, breathing out. So therefore, they have some limitations. First of all, they cannot double. Second of all, they cannot take a sheva. And thirdly, they prefer A sound vowels. So what do these mean? First of all, they are too soft of a sound to be doubling them. So if you take, for example, he, how do you double a breathing out? How do you double that? If you have some letter like d, you can do d. If you have something like p, you can do p. Right? You can do two of these hard or bigger sounds, but you cannot double that, or the two silent sounds. Even with the resh, again, it's because in Hebrew it's pronounced in the throat, r. It's not pronounced with the tongue, r, like in other languages. So that's why they cannot double. In other words, you will never see dagesh in them. So any of these gutturals will never take a dagesh because they cannot be doubled. Rule number 2, and again you can write it in two different ways. They either cannot take a dagesh or they take compound sheva. That means the same thing. Why? Again, the sound is too soft, so if you have an aleph or ain and they take a silent sheva, then you would have no sound. So they do need something more than a sheva. But there are certain words that require a sheva, so then what do? You do a compound sheva. So what's the difference between sheva and compound sheva? Really, the only difference is that compound sheva is a sheva for gutturals. You will never see the regular consonants with a compound sheva, and vice versa, you will never see gutturals with a regular sheva. So gutturals take compound sheva, and the rest of the consonants take a regular sheva, not a compound. And finally, they prefer A sound vowels, so the A is their favorite. Sometimes they take the E. They really do not like the U sounds at all, so they will try to change it. And this becomes very, very important once we get to verbs. You will see that they will do some interesting things with the vowels because they're just picky. They like the A sound. Final has sometimes take a little dot in it. Do not confuse this for a dagesh. That is never a dagesh because he is a guttural, so it cannot double, it cannot take a dagesh. It's called mapik, and the function of a mapik is that it indicates that the final he is used as a third feminine singular suffix. We'll talk about it later. Basically, it means that it's her or hers in translation at the end of a word. The final thing I want to do in this video is look at some similarities with the look, the shape, or the sound of some of these letters. Let's look at first those letters that look the same. We have Vav, Nun, final, Nun, regular, and Yod. How do you recognize what is what, which is which? If you look at the square, the Vav is just a straight line. In some prints, you will have the little curve on the top, curving to the left a little, almost like a shepherd's rod or something like that. So that's your Vav, but it stays within the square box. If it leaves the box, notice the top is identical. The only difference is that the final Nun goes outside underneath the box. Okay, so if it is within the box, it's a Vav. If it leaves the box and goes below the line, it's the final Nun. The Nun is kind of like the Vav on the top, except it has a hook on the bottom. Okay, so the Nun is the difference between the Vav and the Nun is that the Nun, the regular Nun, not the final, has a curve on the Bible. On the bottom, it turns to the left. And the Yod is just like an apostrophe. It's very, very short. It's up on the top of the square box. Here are others that look the same. We have Bet, Resh, Dalet, final Chet, final Kaf, final Nun, and final Vav. Final Nun and final Vav we already talked about. What you see how they are different. But let's talk about the others. First, the difference between Bet and Resh. Bet is like a Resh on the top, so you do a complete Resh, except it has a line on the bottom. Okay, so Resh is a single line that starts on the top left and ends in the bottom right and goes along the edges of the square box. To make it into a Bet, you underline it, so it has a line on the bottom. That's the difference between Resh and Bet. The difference between Resh and Dalet is a little different. Resh is a single stroke, so you start with your pen on the top left, and you keep your pen and you draw a single line all the way to the bottom right and you go along the edge. With Dalet, these are two separate lines. You have a straight line along the top, and then you have a straight line along the right side, and then you leave a little overhang there, if you notice. So there is a little overhang. So Resh, a single line, single stroke, starting on the top left, going along the edges to the bottom right. Dalet, two separate lines, one on the top straight, and then leave a little overhang on the right and go straight down with the second line. Moving to final Kaf, the Ch sound, or K. It's kind of like a Dalet, except it goes outside, so it goes below the line. So final Kaf, like a Dalet, but it goes below the line. Here is the final letters that look alike before we look at those that sound the same. So we have T, Ch, and H. Let's start with the H and Ch first. They are identical. The difference is that there is a space on the top left for the He. So He and Chet, the difference is that for the he, you leave a little space on the top left. The difference between chet and tav is that the tav has a little leg on the bottom left side. So you write something like chet, but on the bottom left it has a little hook, little leg. Okay, and to conclude this video, let's look at some letters that sound the same. So for Ain and Aleph, they're both silent. The only difference to know, the only way to know the difference is really just to see the text, because they will sound the same. These two letters also sound the same, K and K. They sound the same, they are completely different letters. So you can have a word and one is spelled with one letter, the other spelled is with the other, and they will have completely different meaning. They have nothing with each other. They are totally two separate words. They may sound identical, okay? But they are using different letter, K and K. The next one is also with the kaf, but it's a kaf without the dagesh, so it's Ch and Ch. Here it's kaf with the dagesh is K and K, and here is kaf without the dagesh is Ch and Ch. And the final two that sound the same are T and T, Tav and Tet. So Tav and Tet, T, T, Kof and Chet, Ch, Ch, and Kaf and Kof, K, K.